his claim was that the Black community should leave the Democratic Party altogether. And you guys pretty much agreed on this. And I'm curious.
He thought he was about to mollywop me, John. He came through like, all right, I'm about to hit her with this one. Y'all ready?
From Jubilee Media, this is the Surrounded Podcast. I'm John Regalado, and today Amanda Seales is back after being at the center of last week's episode where she debated 25 Black conservatives. We're going to react to some of the highlights from the episode, hear her take on the arguments, as well as dig into her claims in more detail, exploring the topics of reparations, policing, socialism, the future of the Democratic Party, as well as policing. So without further ado, here's our conversation. Amanda, it's great to meet you, and welcome to the Surrounded follow-up.
I'm here. I'm still alive after my Surrounded taping.
Yeah, well, we're gonna watch some of it together today, if that's cool with you, and react to it.
Please.
Okay. What were you thinking going into it? What were you thinking on your way home from it?
I was originally going into it with a kind of like, let's get these folks. They're going to be talking stupid stuff and we're going to tell them. And something switched in me once I got in there and I wasn't expecting it. Don't get me wrong, like it was very irritating to hear the stances that people were taking, particularly because they are fellow Black people. However, I had this feeling of more so like sadness that they felt this way because there's no reason that any Black person would be against. There's no like true, honest, like fair reason why any Black person would be against any of my claims. Like none of my claims are subjective. Like they're all fact-based. When I went in there, initially it was like, I'm about to argue, but more so it was like, I wanted to like hold them. Like I wish that those conversations were actually able to happen in a space that was not like built for contention, because I do think I could actually get a lot of those people to understand like the error of their thought process if I too were not as compelled to like feel like I have to like defend versus just educate.
In this episode in particular, the disagreements were more about kind of subtle narratives than they were about facts
and statistics, right? Or like even statistics aren't really facts, but it's like, didn't you feel like we were doing a lot of arguing about like stereotypes and like I feel this way, I feel that way, versus like, okay, you might feel that way, but that doesn't change. Like redlining. Like redlining is real. I think the very, 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 very unique thing about this particular Surrounded is that it's two sides within a cultural space, within a cultural group. But that is a unique scenario because I believe that had I been surrounded by just conservatives in general, I wouldn't have felt that feeling of like, no, like this is us, that made me say I actually did that made me drop this like go for the throat, like go for the jugular mindset, and instead made me want to be like, I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes the jugular was gone for.
And we'll go about. Did you watch any of the previous episodes before you decide to do it?
I had seen clips. As a Black radical, it's imperative that we exist in multiple mediums, right? And when we look at those who came before in the Black radical tradition, people like those who are over my shoulder, whether it's Gil Scott-Heron as a poet or, Baldwin as a writer and philosopher, or as Malcolm X as an organizer and philosopher as well, like all of them would have just been really smart Black men in their neighborhoods if they hadn't somehow gotten onto media with their messaging. Right. And so for me, it was like, well, I know that this is going to be putting myself in like through a gauntlet. But it allowed, like sometimes people think why would Amanda go in certain spaces and they don't understand that I'm seeing like generations ahead of like the kind of content that that I believe is going to continue to still like be present, and long form is what I think will end up outlasting like these little videos that we post here and there.
No, I feel the same way. And on behalf of Jubilee, we like are very appreciative of you for stepping into the arena. It is not an easy thing to do. I'm going to pull up the first clip. Your first claim is, it's undeniable that reparations are just and necessary. This was kind of the most contentious moment, or the first contentious moment that came up when I was watching it. And so this is with Jordan.
So let's get off this thing where, oh, America is so racist. What's making America so racist is people that continue to talk about racism and continue to focus on racism instead of focusing on unity and bringing our country forward. People that have this liberal mindset are infecting our communities, Black people, and making us victims and not victors. I refuse to embrace a victim mentality, because that's not what our grandparents and Harriet Tubman and those people fought for. They fought for equal opportunity.
Do not bring up Harriet Tubman's name in vain, baby, please.
I said the Lord's name in vain. The Lord's name.
Harriet Tubman was literally saving her family and others from slavery.
Yeah. You know who helped her? White people.
You know who helped her?
They were on the Underground Railroad. Come on in.
No, you know who helped her?
Come on in.
No, you know who helped her?
God.
People who benefit from white supremacy. One of the things
it's a lie. White supremacy is a lie.
No, sir,
it's
that's simply not
There's
true.
No...
So, something that would happen quite often throughout this show was I would be stunned to confidently state that white supremacy is a myth. That's just like white supremacists would be mad.
Right.
Because they're like, nah, we are the supreme. Like, no, don't like.
And that ended in a place where I was confused as well. When he said white supremacy is a lie, I wasn't following Jordan there either.
Jordan's not following Jordan. But the point that I was about to make is that the reason that those white people were able to help was because they benefit from white privilege, and thus they have a certain shroud of protection around them, which is how it's an underground railroad. She wouldn't have needed their help if there wasn't a slavery to escape. Slavery is the result of white supremacy, and there are still the repercussions of that to this day. Thus, reparations is a completely valid response, and it has been given to a number of other communities for harm done. Why would it not be given to Black Americans?
If I go back to where Jordan was starting in that clip, and this is kind of where I talk about how there was like a tug of war of narratives, and it came up with some other people, he talks about this victimization. And what's your response, or do you think there's validity in that concern?
No, I don't.
Yeah. No. And even if you don't think it's valid,
it's gaslighting. It's gaslighting.
And how come?
Because we learned about the Holocaust of the Jewish people of Germany for every year of my grade school class. We are now watching a genocide of Palestinians solely grounded in a concept of victimhood of Israelis. And somehow, when Black people are saying, hey, these laws and these institutionalized these institutionalized systems that are still organized around not granting equal rights and equal access to Black people are preventing egalitarianism. That's not being a victim. That's actually being very action-oriented and continuing to point out, you will not get over on us. The suggestion that if we just pretend like we're not Black and like nobody's a color, then racism goes away is actually just quiet racism, because there is still systems in place that are supported by this. And there are grandparents who taught their children, who are teaching their children. And we're watching it every day. These thugs coming out of U-Haul trucks with their face covered, holding up Confederate flags, saying we will not be replaced.
while we're on the topic though of reparations, because I totally hear you, we see it, we've seen actions like this in other countries as well as within the United States based on other events in history. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the best way to get support from, enough American voters to make this a reality? Because I think there's a really legitimate argument behind it, but I'm curious, like, what do you think is the strongest message to get like real support behind it?
Honestly, we don't live in a nation that has any regard for correction. Like, we live in a nation that is a narcissistic mindset in terms of like our culture in the United States is a narcissistic mindset. And the narcissistic mindset says that the narcissistic mindset says that we've done nothing wrong. Like, that's what a narcissist believes. Like, you can never correct a narcissist because there's an exceptionalism that they're always possessing, right? So what you're asking is unfortunately so many steps behind because as a people, first of all, we still don't have a United States. Like, as a people, like, we're watching immigrants who actively pay taxes, are active parts of our communities, be kidnapped as if they are not functional members of our society. Mm-hmm. That is a result of us not being a United States. In some places, you see the community fighting because they're like, these people are our community. Like, this is not possible. But we don't have the homogeneity of a place like Korea or a place like Germany, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. Or at one point in time. We have never, as a country, come together under a flag of true multiculturalism that is not based in assimilation. Mm-hmm. Like in Tanzania, at one point, they had a president who was like, you can be everything that you are. At the end of the day, you're also a Tanzanian. And so that brings people to a dual consciousness around like protecting their identities and their cultures and their ethnicities, as well as upholding this Tanzanian concept. In the United States, like, that's not been an honest thing, because the idea is that you can't be both. You can't be Mexican and an indigenous Mexican who is protecting and remembering and living in your culture and American. Mm-hmm. You have American is like just capitalist blankness. It's just money. That's all it is. So to say, like, what would it require to get people to convince like voters that reparations would be possible or positive in this current climate? You would have to make them believe that to give Black people reparations would be good for their pockets. You would have to convince them that if we give Black people reparations, it'll make you rich.
Like an economic middle class argument, like, let's strengthen the middle class.
Something, but there'd have to be interest convergence. It would not be on a moral ground like it has always been positioned when it comes to Jewish people or even slave owners. It was positioned on we took your slaves, so the right thing to do, since we stopped you from making money, is to give you some money. I mean, England didn't finish paying reparations. That they had their taxpayers in England collectively paying reparations to slave owning families till 2015. Mm-hmm.
I hear you, and I appreciate you digging into that. I'm going to go to our next clip. This is with Austin in the context of your second claim, which was Black on Black crime is a result of underinvestment and over-policing.
The Black community was at its economically strongest while being at its poorest during the segregation era. Prior to 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King in his last speech said that we have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all of the exports of Canada and more than all of the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. That was when we were economically at our poorest. Yet 85% of our Black children were growing up with a father in the home. There was less Black on Black crime. There was less disenfranchisement.
Why was there less Black on Black crime?
Because we needed to live together. We had to stick by each other. We had to stick
What
by
was
each
there
other.
also less of?
I'm not sure where you're leading. That's a leading question. I don't like those.
You don't like this?
I don't like leading questions, no. I like direct stuff.
So essentially, when we were living in our own communities, we were also policing our own communities.
Could you kind of, build on the idea that you were starting to move towards with him?
the concept of black on black crime is not created by black people. The concept of black on black crime is created by systems that benefit from the free labor of black people. And those systems are are effective with the support of police and policing, which is derived from slave catching. So to base the concept of black on black crime to couch it in, well, when we lived by ourselves, we were better. We got along better. It's like he was agreeing with me and didn't realize that he was agreeing with me, because ultimately, yes, when we were not having to be invaded on a regular basis for the goal of snatching up folks to be a part of another industrial, system, we did have more autonomy, and we, in that autonomy, operated more as a socialist community. When we look at Black communities that are, that have been created, and I think that's the other thing that a lot of people do not want to acknowledge, like there have been Black communities that were created by scarcity, like literally capitalists created scarcity that forced Black people into certain spaces that others did not have to inhabit. The projects, et cetera, are housing that was controlled and was provided less resources than other places. It was also painted with lead paint that we know affects the way the frontal lobe operates, which also affects the way that we react to things. It increases it increases violence. It increases aggression. We also know that the food quality is less, right? So you're not getting better food. We also know that if I'm living on top of you and to the side of you and to the right of you, et cetera, now there's more noise. I'm not sleeping as comfortably. There's less trees. My air isn't even as quality. And when I went on a toxic tour around the world, around the nation, to these different Black communities that had popped up out of like industrialism, whether it be like Motor City, whether it be like in Detroit, with the car, with the car industry, or in Portsmouth, Virginia, there is environmental racism that takes place. And we're seeing that happen right now with Elon Musk, and the difference with the ability to cease his building in Tucson, which is a predominantly white community, but not in Memphis.
There's layers and layers and layers of disadvantages, even toxins that are in areas that can create a scenario where then if you're very selective and you choose one statistic, you can say, oh, there's more crime committed here. But what you're saying is it's the intersection of so many different variables that are affecting that community, holding that community back, poisoning that community. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, because that is the truth. I lived next door to a precinct in Harlem. So I was next to the cops all the time. I remember one time coming home and a woman was being mugged. And she was across the street. She was being mugged. And I started screaming because that's the person I am, right? And the police were 1 block away. And when those guys were like still wrangling her, I start sprinting to the police. They ended up, in my surprise, they were on break. So they were all standing outside. Like they must have had some shift change. And I ran up and I was like, they're mugging someone right down that block. Not a single person moved. And one guy said, what are we supposed to do about it?
Wow.
When I lived in Calabasas, I lived in a gated community. And one of our security guards was an indigenous man named Willie. He had a ponytail. And one night I had pulled in, I said, Willie, if somebody came up here and said to you and held out a gun and said, let me in this community, what would you do? He said, well, gotta let him in. But the cops ride around here every 7 minutes.
Yeah, it's a stark divide. There was a few years ago, this was kind of in the middle of everything that was going on in 2020, where it felt like there was a wider interest in re-envisioning law enforcement, especially in Black communities where this over-policing is happening. it felt like that kind of lost some steam, and I'm curious, do you still think there's a lot of like interesting ideas to rethinking law enforcement and policing?
You know, the thing about where we are in the United States versus 2020, I think that there was something that in 2020 felt safe for people in terms of having like the beginning of a different idea about things, because the murder of George Floyd was so palpable and the disarray around COVID that it allowed folks to have the willingness to imagine something else. We are at a point now where it can't just be imagining something else, and it has to be destroying what's there. I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe that we need policing. Do I believe that there needs to be protecting of citizens?
Yeah.
Yes. However, that is not what the police are there for. There's literally a whole case, Castle Rock versus, I can never remember who it's versus, but Castle Rock versus this particular police department was a Supreme Court case that ended up being ruled in the favor of the police department, that says the police do not have to come and protect you if you call them. It is within their jurisdiction to decide whether or not they want to help you. It is not their built-in responsibility.
So that gentleman who you were speaking to, Austin, he reveals that he's a police dispatcher. And that is sort of, I think that's how the interaction ends. I want to play you that part and just kind of,
I forgot
so
about
you can
that.
kind of hear that back.
Talking to somebody that works as a police dispatcher when I'm not making content. So here's the thing.
I
So
see.
no. You see what?
Well,
The truth is, you're about to see the truth if you just give me a second. Like Trump said, just give me a second. I'm going to do the weave, but give me a minute.
Well, here's
So
what
when
you all keep doing. You
just
keep
give me-
interrupting me when
Well,
I'm talking, and you don't want to hear the
but
point
the
that I'm
point
going to
you're-
make.
the point that
And
you're
yet you want
raising-
me to respect your point. And that's not how a debate works. So if you want me to keep getting louder, I will do it. But ultimately, if I show you respect, give me the respect back. I let you talk. I let you make your points. I am countering your points. And my points are just as valid as yours, even though you got a pocket square and a Church of Christ pin on your chest.
It's not a Church of Christ. It's
Whatever.
A cross. There's a
It's a
difference.
cross. Same
Yep.
difference. You got an American flag and you think you know something because you a cop. And ultimately,
Not a cop, dispatcher. There's a difference.
it's a cab all day over here. So let me make that clear. But let me also add to my point. My point is that you can sit here and blame black people on black people all day long and not acknowledge that we are forced into, you're coming to interrupt me again.
I haven't even said a word.
Obviously a lot of contention going on there. I'm just curious, when you see it played back for you, any new thoughts or reflections come up?
Oh, he just wanted to be famous. That's somebody that wants a TV show.
And why do you feel that way?
Because I know a performer when I see one. I've been a thespian since I was 8.
When he disclosed to you that he was a police dispatcher, do you remember when he said that, and did that change how you felt about your conversation with him or the confrontation you were having with him at that moment?
No, but I can see watching it that I was like, oh, well, I'm talking to people. I'm talking to I'm talking to a non-impartial audience. This person is, even though he's like, I'm not a cop, I'm like, yeah, you on the payroll, you there, you don't see a problem with it. So if you don't see a problem with policing, you might as well be a cop. You're literally there dispatching and you don't see nothing wrong.
Right. So this next one, I think, is with Jazz. She had lost some loved ones to, I believe, a shooting. And this was in the context of your claim, systemic racism isn't a theory. It's a lived reality backed by data and history.
The concept of white people is about people who are upholding a supremacy of whiteness versus people who understand that there should be an egalitarianism. There should be an equality.
That we are becoming the new white supremacists.
We are.
We've been putting them on a pedestal.
We are.
We feel like we can't do anything.
No, it's not that we're putting them. It's not that we're putting them on a pedestal. It's that we are joining them and instead weaponizing our blackness against our people. When we do what you're saying, we are saying, I am better because I figured it out. And so you're the problem because you didn't figure it out.
But Amanda, what about if I believe that the American dream is, I have a right to that as well? Is that me joining white people, or is that me saying, you know what, I want a life for my dream? The American dream for me, because it may look different from other people. Some people it's a boss chick. For me, I want my kids to grow up in a wonderful neighborhood. I want them to go to college. I want to have a 401k. I want to do this. I want to do that. So I feel like a lot of times in the Black community, we associate anything that's right or that's just or that's striving forward with whiteness. So when you say that we're working with them,
it's not that it's whiteness, it's capitalism. And I think that's what we have to understand the difference of. The concept of capitalism always is grounded in exploitation.
But Amanda, we're sitting here benefiting from capitalism, and you know that because you would want to move to a
understand that we are benefiting. I understand that we are benefiting from capitalism, but I also understand that we would have other people and a majority of people benefit if we were not solely capitalist. That is what it means to be a Black radical. You know, she's somebody who I feel like in a different setting, there could be some breakthroughs. Mm-hmm. There were a couple people there that I felt like that with, because she's responding from trauma. So
a big event, a big
traumatic event. And so like, I also was having to do a very, I can't remember if by that point I knew what had happened to her family, but I felt like I was definitely having to try to make sure that I kind of like protected the realities of her pain. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't want to undermine the realities of that in trying to prove my point, because trauma does breed behaviors. So in the same way that she's disregarding, I think I actually did eventually make this comparison, like in the same way that she's disregarding that trauma from the Black community will lead to certain behaviors, you know, her trauma has informed her response.
Something that I felt coming from her was a sense of conflict of like, my mom had to just get through it, you know, and raise me and give me opportunity. And she was almost hesitant to give too much recognition to trauma because she felt like that might be holding her back. Like she felt like she needed to focus on where she wanted to get rather than maybe what she had experienced and what impact it had had on her.
So that's very Caribbean as the daughter of a Caribbean person, because, you know, emotional maturity just isn't a part of, I would say, my parents' culture, my mother's culture, emotional analysis, etc. Like that wasn't really like a part of the deal. You know, it's really, I mean, I think it's fair to say that hasn't been a part of like multiple cultures in the Western world until fairly recently, right? Like a real committed effort to mindfulness and self-analysis and examination, etc. Right? So there's also just not enough time. Like, you know, there's not enough time. And so one of the things that I end up uncovering towards the end of the episode is like, oh, hold up. A lot of y'all are first generation Americans or you are full on immigrants. So your relationship to the Black American experience is skewed. It's clouded. It's not a direct experience.
Yeah, that comes up with, I think his name's Matt. And
Matt from Angola, who grew up in Maine, but has an opinion on Black. I said, brother, you know, and the thing about him is that he's brilliant. I think that he's actually a really smart kid.
Yeah,
he's just around a lot of idiots who, or he's around a lot of people who know that he is and are using that.
Mm-hmm. Before we talk too much about Matt, though, I want to, with Jazz, someplace that you started with her is you were talking about whiteness, this idea of whiteness. Mm-hmm. And she was also voicing this concern that she felt pressure to feel guilty if she wanted things that were quote unquote like associated with whiteness, like wanting a 401k or living in a nice neighborhood.
I don't know where she got that from.
Yeah.
That's her own thing that she's made up. I don't know where she got that from. I would say that the people that I know, it's not about it being whiteness. And that's why I went into capitalism. It's not about it being whiteness. It's about it being only allowed to be achieved if you perform a certain way, if you behave a certain way, if you exist a certain way, that is not applied to white people in the same way. And capitalism suggests that these things that determine you having hierarchy are what are considered success, when ultimately that should not be the only version of success that there is. I remember when I had this like breakthrough in my early 20s of realizing that like, oh, so like success doesn't have to be like money based. Because that was all that I feel like I had ever really been taught. Like, I feel like that's how it had always been framed. And then I remember I used to date this underground rapper, and like, he wasn't famous, like on a Jay-Z level, you know, like, but he was able to live comfortably, like without having to scrape and, you know, scratch the bottom of the bowl, but while still doing his passion. And he was a happy guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't bitter. Like, man, if I could just get the private jet like the rest of these, like, it wasn't.
He was content. Is that your beef with capitalism? You know, because that discussion then grew to capitalism, like that it breeds a mindset of never having enough. Like
one of my several beefs with capitalism, yes, because that mindset breeds exploitation, and that mindset breeds a false scarcity that does not exist.
Is there a word or a political philosophy that you think best embodies, you know, what you think we should envision beyond capitalism?
Yes, socialism. Black radicals are very much folks who understand that socialism and the communal mindset that allows for everyone to have an access point into their version of success without exploiting others is a really practical methodology that unfortunately the US and other capitalist nations have not allowed to thrive.
And do you feel like a revolution is absolutely necessary in the United States? Yeah, what kind of revolution?
All of them. All of them.
All the above.
All the above. But it won't happen unless there's education. Education is what starts every revolution.
Okay, so this next clip is Matt Nuclear.
Which, is that a rapper name?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think it's an awesome name, but I don't know.
Race is not something that you are. Race is something that was bestowed and put upon you.
That's racism, not race. Race is simply the aggregation.
No, race is literally something that was created and put upon you. And I want you to listen to me as somebody who has studied this, who has a master's in African American Studies from the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University. I want you to understand very clearly that race is not something that is biological. There is literally
Look at us. Look at the differences.
There is many differences that are equated to ours that
and
has nothing to do with race.
Melanin content is not biological at all.
So if you have a black parent and you have a white parent, and now you come out looking white, how is that a biological proof of your race?
Most of them
There's
come
no
out
most of them.
having curly hair.
Stop. There's no most of them. You do not
Mixed
have anything to
You're
prove
mixed
that.
race too.
I am not mixed race. My mother is black and my father is black.
Well, my father is also considered black, but he's very much has a lot of European DNA. And
you know what I think? I think that you are at a phase of your learning where you are a contrarian, and I look forward to seeing your development because I have a feeling that you're actually going to flip the script eventually. By the way, these are the moments where I remember, okay, so like my ex, he had a 7-year-old daughter, and like, do you have kids?
I do have a daughter.
How old is she?
She's 4.
Do you find yourself sometimes having to remember that she's 4 before you get into an argument with a 4-year-old? And you're like, whoa.
I argue with her like she's a grown up on a regular basis.
Like my ex's daughter, I'd be like, I'd have to catch myself. Like, you're really about to have like a full argument with a 6-year-old.
It happens faster than you realize.
And so like, that's where, this is one of those moments where I had to remember, Amanda, you know that scene in Good Will Hunting where after they have the blow up, they come back to the next session.
Right.
And Robin Williams, rest in peace, is like, you know, I was really mad. And then I remembered, like,
you're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about.
Why, thank you.
I have reached a point in my life, and I remember when I was mad. I remember when I was 20-something and was like, why won't people listen to me? And it was like, well, yeah, because you're smart, but you're not wise yet. So I had to catch myself. I was like, oh, Amanda, remember this young man is.
I loved that though. I loved that layer, and I liked how you were kind of naming it with him, and you were like simultaneously frustrated, but then impressed with his confidence, because he was extremely confident.
Race did not exist as a concept. I think prior to, I think it's like the 1500s, there have been tribes and nations and ethnicities and types of people, right? However, the concept of race was ultimately created and cultivated in order to serve as the buttress for the transatlantic slave trade. It was created as a capitalist concept to support why these people should be enslaved by these people. And if you read Ibram X. Kendi's book, Stand from the Beginning, that's a good place to start, as well as Nell Pinter's The History of White People. It really gives you a very clear path to how this concept required upkeep. So the concept of race, because it is merely a concept, is full of holes. It's not real. So therefore, there were all of these efforts and methods and, fake science created to attempt to make it valid. Mm-hmm. One of the other ways that you can understand that race is a concept, that race is a social construct, is that the bar is always moving in order to determine who gets to have access to white privilege. It is not finite.
What do you mean by that? The bar is always moving?
So when the Irish and the Italians were brought to
right, because they weren't considered white.
They weren't considered white.
Yeah, they were othered in their own kind of way at the time.
Yes. However, after the Emancipation Proclamation, and we see the great migration of Black people across the nation, there becomes the Black codes and the effort to police these Black people so that the 13th Amendment, which allows for slavery if you have been convicted of a crime. So then they need to police these Black people so that they can be put back in prison so that there can continue to be slave labor. Mm-hmm. And they employed that of the Irish and the Italians to do that. And so thus they got access to whiteness. And over time, they became white.
This is where, though, I do think like people get confused or turned off, or they hear a snippet and then they're like, I don't understand it. When you're talking about whiteness, the way you just broke it down now, you're talking about it as like this concept of a protected class, a class that has privilege allotted to them in a special way. You're not talking about it in a like genetic way. You're like, it doesn't exist in a genetic way. Exactly. And so I do think which is why people can pass. Right. And just so to go back to what Matt is saying, he's like, well, look at our skin, or look at us. We all have similar traits. But what you're saying is, there's no line. There's no like obvious line where it's like you're Black and you're not Black. These are ideas constructed. If I am sitting next to a Native American person mm-hmm. who has never, ever had any African for let's say 3 generations, okay? Let's say 3 has never had any interactions with African people, and they're darker than me. Are they Black? No. Right. Exactly. Okay, so the next clip, this is with Layla. And so Layla, yeah, I know. I think I know what the clip this is. Is about rap music. Are you ready for okay.
I do want to touch on a point that you did mention earlier, that you would argue that, Black people have less opportunities in America. I do not agree with that. I have not had, first of all, you're a light-skinned woman. And so are you. Yes. And you're doing great for yourself. Yes. And so colorism really does serve us. I do want to say, why do you think that is, though? Why do you think that? Do you think it's just based off the color of our skin? Or do you think it's based off of the reputation that Black people make for themselves?
What reputation are black people making for
What
themselves?
would you argue? Because I mean, when I look at
who makes the reputation for black people?
Let's look at music, for example.
We already had this conversation with somebody else.
Well, we're gonna have it again. Most of the people that
are we?
Most of the people.
I'm gonna shut it down right now and let you know that the reality is that when you come to black music, for you to say most of the people, you've already lost the argument.
Am I right?
There is no most of the people with black people because you haven't heard of all of black music.
Most of the music that is, let's say, maybe exalted or shown by the media, right?
And who controls those systems?
It defiles
and
black Americans. But who's putting it out there? We are. Black. We're the ones putting it out there.
The distribution systems that are putting them out there are owned by white people.
Who listens to them?
Everything that she was saying is, again, what I talk about when I say we're constantly pruning the leaves instead of like at the root. So you can sit here and talk about black music all day, but if you're not acknowledging that the systems that are putting out the black music are all controlled by white-run corporations, then you're not having a real conversation. And, you know, this was a conversation that had happened on The Breakfast Club with Lear Cohen, who is like at the very top of Interscope. And Lear Cohen was like, yeah, you know, we make money off of it.
Yeah. And so you feel like, do you think the music industry is intentionally perpetuating destructive stereotypes?
I didn't always. I didn't always, because it just felt like too conspiracy theory, you know, like, oh, come on. And,
it does, yeah. No,
you know, like you know, you're just like, is everything a conspiracy? And then you're like, yes, actually. And I say that in the sense that it's not conspiracy theory. It feels like conspiracy if you believe that the powers that be have your best interests at heart. So if that is your grounding foundational belief, then anything challenging that feels like conspiracy, which is why like when people say like the system isn't broken, it's working the way it's supposed to, flips a switch for a lot of people because you're like, oh, so like it's not crazy to consider that there would be efforts to continue a narrative of harm for a people that we never gave a damn about. Like that's actually not crazy. You know, like you think, dang, why is there so many cop shows and military shows? And you're like, I'm bugging. And then you find out that there's actually CIA involvement and FBI involvement in the movies that get made and how they get made. And then you understand that oligarchs are running newspapers. You understand that networks that used to operate like in a more individual mindset, for instance, like HBO, gets bought up by a big conglomerate that now has to serve a bottom line, that now determines like this matters and this doesn't matter, because it's not about an artistic mandate, it's about a money mandate. And that money mandate is often determined by people who may not necessarily every time say, we're going to do this because we don't like black people. However, they may willingly say, well, those guys did it and they didn't like black people and they made a lot of money off of it. And I mean, I couldn't care less, but I want to make money, so I'll do it too. Does that make sense? The
power of the financial.
Yeah, it's just like
potential.
And as somebody who grew up in the 90s and grew up with gangster rap and all of it, sometimes I listen and I'm like, what? What were we listening to? And I just say, I can't, as someone who also came out of the music industry and understands how it works, like, I just simply haven't had enough evidence to convince me otherwise that there wasn't a concerted effort to continue to expand this music from pain at the threat of what it would continue to do to communities. And on just like the black music that was wholesome, that was like, you know, really about love, etc., ended up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, like, I mean, 50s and 60s more so, ended up being stolen from black people and re-performed, you know, by white people. So like, we didn't even get to have our own representation of our stories and our narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we're talking about the harm that we're experiencing, they're like, oh yeah, please, all the blacks, go for it. Go say it. Say that, say that, say that. So,
no, I think
it doesn't change the argument though, which is that we don't control those systems.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate you breaking that down. I think there's like a lot, you could talk for hours just about that. The very last clip was with John Samuel. John Samuel, I believe, is running for Congress. First name. Yeah, that's what you said. I thought that was funny. He's running for Congress, and his claim was that the black community should leave the Democratic Party altogether.
Well, I'm just saying that a lot of people, especially where I'm from San Diego, will like to put black conservatives in this box. And the reason why I say specifically in my claim that black people need to walk away from the Democratic Party is because every single election cycle, all they do is use us as their tokens. They use us as their kind of election tools. They use us as these campaign posters. They tell us to come to their rallies. They tell us to sing on their stages. They tell us to do all these things, and they forget about us 3 other years, and they remember us 4 years later.
I'm curious.
He thought he was about to mollywop me, John. He came through like, all right, I'm about to hit her with this one. Y'all ready?
But then when you guys got along, he went into his politician mode and was just like, using it. But I feel like we're in this interesting moment. Zoran is shaking things up. I feel like the political spectrum is potentially in flux, and does that excite you about the possibilities?
I mean, I think excite is a strong word. I really only get excited about like kittens and trips, but the thing about it is that not enough of us really know history to be able to just do basic pattern recognition, right? Like, there have been many parties in the history of the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation and abolitionist movement, that ended up happening because a Republican Party decided to be about it. Like, before it was the Whigs, it was like the Whigs, WHIGS, and I believe it was like the Whigs and the Democrats. And then the Republican Party was born out of interest convergence, where you had folks who genuinely were like, we probably shouldn't be enslaving people. And then other folks were like, yeah, slavery is bad, but not because of that. But because like these people keep getting rich and we're not getting rich. So like we should just cut it off. And though that wasn't a moral stance, it was interest convergence. So there was enough people that both had a desire to end slavery, that a third party was born. And so this has happened before. I believe that the biggest error that non-white people and people who are against white supremacy have made in this nation's history is the failure to create another third party post civil rights movement. There should have been coalition building beyond Republicans and Democrats, because Republicans and Democrats were ultimately not ever created solely for the purpose of expanding the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness to everyone in this nation, right? So where we are now is like, yeah, here we go. This is about time. It's about time. It's around, it's around the same type of cyclical time period where there's unrest. And, I'm sure the astrologists are like, yeah, Amanda, you're so right. Because the 10th house and the 11th house is being ruled by Sagitt, blah, blah, blah. And I'm with them. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily I wouldn't use exciting as a term, but
right.
It's a time of possibility. And I feel like that's what so many people have not witnessed. They haven't even witnessed possibility.
Yeah.
And so their imaginations are stunted. Their empathy is cut off. And so a lot of things are happening all at once. People's empathy is being forced to be opened by knowledge of what's taking place in Gaza, in Palestine at large, in the Congo, in Sudan. People's political knowledge is being bust wide open as they're like, maybe Cory Booker really isn't doing anything. Maybe Democrats really aren't our BFFs. So, and then their identities as Americans is being really flipped on its head, because it's like, wait, maybe I don't want to be American because this feels whack.
Well, we can end it on that. Amanda,
you took in a lot today, John. I gave you a lot.
I did take it a lot.
I hope you take a bath after this. Not a shower, a bath. Like, just really spa it up.
No, I'm definitely sweating. I got to turn the fan on here. But I appreciate your time. And I guess any advice to somebody who's going to step into the center of Surrounded? Would you do it again? Don't do it.
You know what? I'll just say on a basic level, like, I got there late. Like, I got there kind of late. Like, I didn't have, like, I felt like rushed into it on my own accord. Right.
Yeah.
Like I did. So that was already, like, that had already kind of like set me back. I didn't set myself up to have like comfort before going into chaos. So if you're going to do this, like, do that. Understand that you're walking into chaos. So, like, get there. By the way, I just want to shout out my security guard, Brother Amir, because he had absolutely said we should get there early. And I was like, early, schmarly, we'll get there on time. He was absolutely right. And I was wrong. But that's why he's security. He sees the reconnaissance. He already sees the danger. And I'm over here like, it'll be fine. No, you should have got there early and set up camp and ate your rations. John, I had a very unique Surrounded because I was surrounded by people that, regardless of what they believe, I still consider them to be a part of my community.
Yeah.
And so when I went in there, I told you in the beginning of the episode, like, something shifted in me into like more of a place of love where I wanted to be an educator versus a eviscerator, you know? But there are a few times during the episode where I addressed the room, you know, and I wanted to bring them in to understand that this is an us conversation. I don't see you all as my enemies. I don't see you all, you know, as opposition outside of your opinion. I don't know you to believe that. Like, Clarence Thomas is opposition beyond opinion because he has power that he is wielding to commit harm. These people, we're in a warehouse in LA.
Amanda, any last thing you want to say to the listener before signing off?
You can check out my YouTube show, Views from Amanda Land, every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 4 hours. I have great guests. We have great conversations. And if you like my work and you want to continue to see it expand and continue, it is by your support. I am no longer a part of the system. I bought my book back from Simon & Schuster. So I don't have any corporate ties. I don't have, you know, people think I'm like still employed by Hollywood. No, I'm employed by y'all. So thank you as the grassroots for supporting my Patreon, subscribing for $5 a month, for supporting my artwork at Amanda Land Exports, and for even supporting by just sharing my thoughts and insights because they come from a genuine place of love for this people and this planet.
Beautiful. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for stepping into the arena. And I hope you...
We are the champions, my friend.
I love it. Well, take care, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime. For more follow-up episodes of Surrounded, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on X or on YouTube, John Regalado. And if you want to see the main video episodes of the show, follow Jubilee on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening. Remember, you could be wrong, so could I. Keep your mind open. Until next time.